Hello and welcome to the Embrace Your Destiny podcast. My name is Sandra Dawes and I'm your host. And if you're new to the podcast, the Embrace Your Destiny podcast is all about sharing the stories of women who have been through an experience in their life. They want to share the lessons they learned from it and offer advice to anybody who might be going through something similar in their own life. And today's guest is Justina Ware, and Justina is an outgoing, bubbly, and kind-hearted soul. Her educational background has earned her degrees in psychology and health studies, but by trade, she works with and advocates on behalf of children and youth. Justina is a business owner and currently in the process of writing her first fiction novel. As an avid traveler, she is now looking to plan more trips that have a purpose by touching the lives of locals that reside in communities she visits. In the past, she has volunteered at an orphanage in the Dominican Republic and in Dominica after Hurricane Maria. Welcome, Justina.
Thanks for having me.
So, Justina, why don't we start off with you sharing the part of your journey that you feel would be of interest to our listeners today?
Okay, so I guess the part of the journey, my journey that I'd like to share is something I want to say almost everyone, if not everyone, can relate to. I guess it's that awkward time between, I guess, what we would describe as young adulthood. But for me and those around me that I've spoken to, we don't want to call it adulthood because I guess that transition, I'd say maybe around 18, right out of high school, and whether you're continuing in post-secondary or starting work right away, starting a family, whatever it is, you never quite get the feeling that even though you're 18 and legally you're an adult, you don't feel as an adult. And especially now, I'm in my late 20s now, kind of looking back, I was like, even now, I don't feel like an adult. So I can only imagine years ago, how it was, but it's like you're almost kind of forced to start making decisions for yourself that in the end can affect you like the rest of your life. So for me, that's kind of, I guess now that I'm older and, hindsight looking back, it was a pretty tough time, pretty difficult time. I know they like to say that puberty and, that young, or I'd say like around the teenage years is what's difficult. But I think being 18 and that age range is a lot more difficult just because when you are younger, you kind of have your parents there as guidance and you're not afraid to ask. But once you're at that age, especially, if you're someone that's living on campus or you decide to move out right at 18, you kind of don't have that support or that backbone. And pride comes into it too, where you don't want to ask because, you're an adult. You're supposed to know what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to figure it out on your own. So that I want to say is kind of was the most difficult point of my life and kind of what shaped me and to who I am today. But yeah, and that's kind of also the basis of where my book comes from, that awkward part of life, that awkward stage in life. And that was the inspiration for the book that I wrote.
Right. And it's funny because I've said it before, even in some of the stuff that I've done, that, when you're in high school, like even when you graduate, you've been asking for permission to go to the bathroom, you know what I mean? And then now all of a sudden you're supposed to know what you want to do with the rest of your life, what career you want to do. And I feel like we haven't, most of us growing up in North America, it's not like you've been given that freedom or independence to make those big decisions up to that point. But now that you're 18, it's like all of a sudden there's this switch and you're supposed to be able to have it all together and make these big decisions. But I don't think that most of us anyway, are really equipped to make those decisions at that age. And so you end up, going to university or going to college or doing whatever because you think it's the right thing to do. But whether or not it's the right thing for you as an individual, you haven't quite figured out yet.
Yeah, and it's always 18 is this like magic number, but I was actually discussing with some people at work the other day, and I was saying that at 18, when I turned 18, the most I could do was sign my own permission forms in high school because I turned 18 in March. So between March and June, when the school year ended, I was just happy that I could sign my own permission forms. But apart from that, like you can't drink, you're not old enough to drink, you're not old enough to go to the club. So I'm like, I don't know why 18 is this age that everyone focuses on when, technically, I guess it's 19 almost. I guess 18 is when you have the I guess, the adult responsibilities like for yourself, but you can't really start having fun till you're 19 even. So, yeah. And I guess we were talking about it at work and just how why 18 is just this number. And, I even now I do work with youth and children, and they're always like, oh, I can't wait to turn 18 so I can move out. And I don't know if it's society or what it is that it's like once at 18, you're supposed to know what you want to do and you have to move out and you're supposed to, figure out your life and you're supposed to do it on your own. That you're not supposed to, at that point, it's like, oh, your parents become free, the empty nesters, and then they can live their life. And it's just this focus on 18. I feel like as a society, we focus on 18, 25, and 30 just way too much. Those are like the landmarks, and that if you haven't achieved certain things by those certain ages, then you're deemed a failure.
Right. Yeah. And I think that it's, but times have changed, and the reality of economics and finances and all that stuff make it so much harder to be completely independent, even at 30 for a lot of people. You know what I mean? So it's about really figuring out what works for you and not allowing those societal pressures to make you feel like you have to get to a certain point at a certain age, or, you have to have kids by a certain age, or you have to be married by a certain age or whatever, because I feel like those are unnecessary pressures, and life is hard enough as it is.
As it is, yes. I actually did a presentation at U of T last year on that very topic.
Yeah, because there's so much to figure out, and I feel like I know that in my 20s, there was a point where I thought I knew it all and that, I had it all figured out. But I feel like every year I would hit up on something else that made me realize that I really didn't have it all figured out. And now that I'm in my 40s, I know that there's no way, I don't know if I'll ever have it all figured out, but I'm willing to continue to learn and be open to the possibilities that are out there, because you just don't know what is possible. You don't know. 20 years ago, the idea of being a social media manager is not something that anybody would have envisioned, but now it's something that people are doing, like so many people are doing, right? And getting paid to do it and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think that when you realize that, the world is constantly evolving and that it's constantly changing, and that there are going to be so many opportunities that we don't even know exist right now that will be available to us in a year from now, 5 years from now, or whatever, that it allows us to be a little bit easier on ourselves, because there is still so much to learn regardless of what age you're at.
I agree. Yep. That's an interesting way to actually look at it too. I didn't even think of looking at it as planning for the unknown. You always plan for the unknown, but in terms of careers and stuff, even 5-10 years ago, we wouldn't have thought of social media being this big thing that it's its own stream, like in post-secondary now that you can learn, in marketing classes, they're teaching you how to market by using social media. So that's actually very interesting.
Right. And like this whole, you can have a career of just being a social media influencer and getting paid to post and all that kind of stuff. Like those things, who would have imagined even 10 years ago that something like that would be possible? So I think that, especially for people coming out of high school and stuff like that, like I feel like that pressure to have it all figured out, we have to let go of that, because that whole, needing to know what you want to do for the next 20, 30 years of your life when you're 18 seems like a bit daunting. And I think that for most of us, unless you've had like a calling from, a really early age, that most of us don't have it all figured out. And even if you did think you had it figured out, by the time you really understand what it's going to take to get there, you might decide that that's not something that you want to do.
Yeah. Or the job just may be obsolete by that time.
Right. That too. I remember for the longest time, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And it wasn't until I had a summer job one year when I was 18 or 19, and I actually worked for a lawyer for the summer, that I realized that that was not something that I wanted to do. But I'm blessed that I was able to have that opportunity, because I realized that, in hindsight, that a lot of my interest in being a lawyer was based on what I saw on TV, that glamorized version of what being a lawyer was going to be, and then to work for a lawyer and realize that it really wasn't as glamorous as they, make it seem on TV, and that there was a lot of work that, I might not necessarily want to do, and that, that you were going to sometimes have to defend people that you didn't necessarily believe should be, like all of those different things just made you question whether or not that was something.
All the cons were really cons.
Yeah, exactly.
you did your list of pros and cons. They're just like,
yeah, and I don't think I want to do it. But at the same time, my parents were heartbroken because I'd been talking about wanting to be a lawyer for so long. For them, that was like, yes, let's do it.
I went through the same thing,
And then
mine was the doctor, so I went through the same thing.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're telling them that you don't think that's where you want to be, and then their hopes are crushed as well. And I think that I know in my case, I think they were more disappointed than I was that wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. But I think that you have to be willing to test things out and try different things and know that you might not have all the answers, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I think, and that it's funny to kind of tie back into the whole journey. I think that was actually a very, very big part for me around that same age, just coming out of high school. Because even, I'd say up in grade 12 and up to grade 12, my whole thing was, okay, I knew I wanted to go into health. And I was saying that I wanted to be a pediatrician. And it got to a point, even in early on in high school, I developed a knack for writing, and I also happened to really, really, really like basketball. So I was just like, okay, I could write and be a sports columnist. And I remember I came home and I told my parents, I want to be a journalist. And they were just like, that's not a good job. Like being a doctor is a better job. And so I said, okay. And they were like, that's something you can always do on the side. And I was like, no, but I want to go into like a journalism program. So they kind of shot that down really early.
Right.
And so I was like, okay. And I guess that was around the same time when Facebook first came out and social media started coming out. So I was like, okay, if anything, it is something I can do on the side. So I kind of went back into, okay, I want to be a pediatrician again. And, I went to university, and once I got in there and, I started taking anatomy and biochemistry and stuff, I'm like, I don't really think I want to do this anymore. And, I tried telling them, and they weren't hearing it. And it became this really big struggle, trying to come home and tell them like it's not something that I wanted to do. And then I ended up failing out of the program I was in first. And I just started taking courses in psychology because I'm like, okay, I need to graduate within 4 years so that, I've graduated with something. So
right.
I didn't even tell them. And I just kept going to school, and they thought I was doing like, a pre-med program.
Pre-med, yeah.
And anytime they would ask, I lied, and I would feel so bad. And I even told them that I had sent in an application for medical school and everything, knowing that I had it. Yeah. And it wasn't until the day of my graduation when they showed up that they saw I graduated with a psychology degree. And they were not happy, but it got to a point where it was really affecting me, and I would come home and I would cry because I was just like I don't know what to do. Like no one's listening to me, right? It's not something that I want to do, or maybe it's something that I did want to do, but at the time I couldn't. I don't want to say I didn't want to put in the work, but my heart wasn't in it,
right?
And it came to a point too where I was just like, is this something that I actually want to do, or am I doing it for them, right? So,
yeah.
But yeah, so it was tough. It was. And after that, I went back and I did another degree. And again, I guess I just did it to say I did it. I don't know. And yeah. And at that point too, was when I was just like, okay, I don't know what I want to do, because I've been saying I want to be a doctor for so long that I didn't really research anything else.
Right. You lost sight of all the other opportunities.
Yeah. So yeah. And that's when I kind of just threw myself into, okay, let me start a business and go from there. But I think that was a big part of it too. And I guess I'm someone too who, I guess in the past, I just didn't really stand up for myself so much. So it was just like, had I found my voice back then, maybe things would have went a little bit differently. So that's kind of something that I like to tell to people now too, that, you can stand up for yourself and you can say how you feel without being disrespectful.
Right. And be okay with the consequences of it.
Yes. Yeah. So that was something else. But again, like I said, it's everything's hindsight too, right? So.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that everything happens for a reason, right?
Yes,
So that,
yes.
you do these things and and they don't work out, but at least now you have better focus and you really put your energy into the things that really matter to you instead of doing things for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I like to call it a very expensive lesson.
Yeah. And sometimes that's what it takes though, right? Is that you have to it has to hurt a little for you to really learn the lesson. Because I know that for me, there have been times where, I've done something and it hasn't worked out, but I didn't get it. It wasn't painful enough. So I went back and did something very similar, 6 months later or a year later. And then because it impacted me in a more severe way, it made me realize that that is not the avenue that I want to head down the next time. And so it sticks a little bit better that way.
It's like someone somewhere is like hitting you in your head saying, why don't you get it?
Right. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes, I know for me, when I decided that I wanted to start my own business, it took twice the same thing happening to me. And so when it happened the second time, I was like, okay, message received. I get it now. You don't need to hit me over the head again with it. I've gotten it. I promise by the end of next year, this won't be where I'm at. But that's what it took, is that it took, having the same thing happen twice for me to be like, okay, how many times is this going to have to happen for me to realize that this isn't where I should be anymore?
Yeah.
But sometimes that's what it takes. So, Justina, you talked about writing a book. So you've written a book already, correct?
Yes.
And what was that book about?
So it's not autobiographical. I guess some people like to assume that once I say that, it's based upon a young woman growing up in Toronto and the struggles that, a young woman typically would have to deal with. So it is not me, but there are certain scenarios in the book that I can relate to. And there are certain things that happen in the book that it was loosely based off of those around me as well. So I know a major theme in the book is hair. And I believe there's one specific scene in the book, and it kind of took me back to my best friend back in high school, something to do with her hair. So it's inspiration from all over. I like to say it was inspired by, my life and the life of those around me, and not a direct, I'm not telling the story. So
right. It's not like it was a memoir or anything like that.
It's funny because I'll tell people that, and then they'll read the book and they'll come back and be like, oh, was this part about you? And was this part about you? And I still stop trying to figure it out. It's not, it is and it isn't. So, and I'm not telling which parts are true and which parts are, I shouldn't say true, but which parts are, my story and which part are someone else's story. And the characters, like, they're all fictional and things too. And it's funny because people come back and be like, oh, I know this character was you, and I know this, and it's like, it's not.
Right. But people always want to connect the dots. Yeah.
So, so a major theme, I guess the two major themes in the book would be self-esteem, and then from that would be hair. I know that, especially as a young Black woman, I feel like times are changing now, especially with this natural hair movement kind of coming out as of recent. But I know when I was that age in high school, in my late teens and early 20s, that was a big thing, that we were afraid of our real hair, our natural hair. So that's one theme. And then just self-esteem. So kind of what I was saying, at the beginning of the podcast, that that awkward age where, you're kind of coming to your own, especially for those who go to post-secondary right after high school, whether you stay at home and go, or whether you move on campus, it's different. And I didn't realize, I guess, because I pretty much, I stayed in the same area that I was born and raised in. So change wasn't something I was used to. I kind of had the same friends, and we all kind of grew up together, and we all stayed throughout elementary and high school. So being thrown into a university with like tens of thousands of people from all over, I was just like, okay, I'm not that popular girl that everyone knows anymore. Now I'm, just this a fish in a big pond. So and then everything else that comes with it too. Trying to make new friends, trying to fit in while trying to, study for an anatomy test and trying to work part-time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that kind of all ties in with this. And then relationships, obviously that's a really big thing. So there's a little bit of everything in the book. A little bit of everything. I was like family relationships, romantic relationships, friendships. It's all in there. Life, yes.
Justina, what would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned in this journey so far?
Oh, that's a good question. Like today, right now, I would say just live for yourself. That doesn't mean be 100% selfish. But I think that's the big thing. I'd say maybe a couple of years ago, I decided to do that. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to put me first. And life's been great since then. And like I said, it's putting you first and not being in a selfish way, but recognizing that there's times where you're going to have to say no, just because for whatever reason, maybe you're too tired or like, physically, mentally, emotionally. And then at the same breath, also taking time out for yourself. So I like to tell people, you also need some me time. So it doesn't necessarily mean hopping on a plane and going on a beach for a week. I've told someone, because you might not have the means to do that. I said, even coming home one day and just turning off your phone completely and climbing into, whether a hot shower or a bubble bath. And it doesn't even have to be wine. You can just pour ginger ale into a nice, fancy glass and just enjoying it and just not having the distractions of the outside world, whether it's social media and just, messages coming in and phone calls. And you can just really sit and think and be with your thoughts is enough to de-stress. So just something as simple as that, just even if it's just once a week for a few hours, just coming home and just shutting yourself off from the outside world. So yeah, just live for yourself. I'd say that's the biggest lesson so far, taking time out for you and doing what's best for you.
Yeah, I would agree with that because I know, I've even written blog posts about this, that selfishness is probably one of the best gifts you can give to yourself and to other people. Because I feel like, you can give so much of yourself that there's nothing left for you. And when you're at that point, there can be so much resentment and frustration and overwhelm that you feel because you've been giving to everybody else and you've been there for everybody else. And now you need some time for yourself and you can't, there's nothing left.
Yeah.
And so when you can take that time to take care of yourself and give yourself the time that you need, then you can be at your best for everyone else, right? So that when somebody else asks you to do something, it's an automatically yes. And it's not, rolling your eyes and being upset about it after you've said the yes because you've got so many other things to do, but because you truly want to do it and you're not expecting anything else out of it.
Yep.
Right? But I feel like sometimes you can overextend yourself because you want to be that people pleaser and you want to do for other people, but then you run on empty and and if there's one thing that somebody's told me that I think is probably the best advice I've ever been given is that you cannot give from an empty cup. So if you want to give to people, if you want to be of service to people, you still have to make time for yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that's one of those things that you learn as you get older and with experience.
Most definitely.
I think that it can be so easy to say yes to everything and think that everything's an amazing opportunity and
just be a people pleaser, try and be a people pleaser. Yeah.
And then, you end up having those feelings of resentment and frustration and feeling like you're always giving to everyone else and nobody's there when you need them. And so it's about really getting to that place of giving because it feels right and saying yes when it feels right, but being able to say no and being absolutely okay with it and not feel like you have to explain yourself or give reasons why or anything like that.
Yeah. And I think if those around you have come to that same point in life, then they can recognize. You don't even have to come on and say, and they'll be like, what, that's fine. And I feel like I've kind of come to that point with a lot of my friends too, where they just recognize, and even with my sister, they just recognize that, when I say no, it's not me being mean or, not because I don't want to, but it's because, you know what, she's tired, or she just can't, not at the moment. She just physically or mentally can't. So
yeah, and not take it personally and be okay with it.
Yes, like not be offended. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Justina, what would you say is, what advice would you give to somebody who's going through something similar, where they might be just graduating and not quite sure what they want to do, or just trying to avoid feeling that pressure of, I'm now 21 or 25 or, hitting on the cusp of 30 and I should have it all sorted out, but I don't?
So kind of, I guess I touched on it, same type of thing when I was doing the presentation at U of T last year. And I was saying that I think a lot of it is society driven. And especially now in this day and age of social media, it's very easy to get caught up in what others are doing. And, you'll see that, someone bought a new car, or someone just, moved into a house, or they just got their dream job.
Or went on an amazing vacation.
Yes. Oh yeah. Vacation. Yes. And I always just say, like, don't worry about what others are doing. Cause you never know what's going on behind closed doors either.
Right.
I know that.
Or what it took for them to get there.
Yes, to get there. So I know someone right now, and she travels quite a bit, and, but it's because she works for an airline. So she gets the vouchers to travel, and that's why. Now people don't know that, and she doesn't have to put it out there. It's not her business to put it out there. But that's one of the reasons why she can travel so much, because she's not paying much for her flight. But if you don't know that and you don't know her, you're gonna wonder, hey, how she get to travel so much? Oh my God!
Right? And she's so lucky.
Yeah, and you're gonna start comparing yourself to her, and you're gonna feel like, wow, I can't even go on more than one vacation a year, and here's someone that's going somewhere every month. And that's what I keep telling people: just, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. You don't know what people are going through. Like you said, you don't know what people have done to get to that point either. So you can't base it off of that. There's also people that I've known, that I've seen, and, they've had the house, they've had this, they've had it all. And you come to find out that the way that it was obtained was, not the correct way. So then they just kind of lose everything too. And it's just like everything that you were looking up to, it wasn't even theirs technically.
Right. Or that they have, the nice house and the nice car, but they're not happy.
Yes,
right. That you can have all of this, and it can look good. It can be Instagram worthy, but not really be fulfilling.
Yes.
And so I think that that's something that we can lose sight of as well.
So I tell people, just don't focus on others. Your time will come when it's ready. But at the same time, don't give up and don't become discouraged because you feel like it's not coming as quickly as you want it to. Just keep working at it, and when the time comes, it comes. I've known people that, been working on their craft for years and years, and it just took, one person finding them and shouting them out, and then all of a sudden they just blew up overnight. And I think with social media now too, because, there's also the good side to social media, that it's very easy to go viral nowadays. So it's like, just keep working at it, and you never know. I think even now there's an artist, Lizzo. She had a song that's been out for 2 years, and I don't even know how it came to be or how it started, but all of a sudden now it's like, a Billboard chart, like she's being invited to all these award shows, but it's like,
right. And I think it was #1 on the Billboard charts and everything. Yeah.
I mean, it's been out there for 2 years. So had she just said, forget it and gave up even a year ago, she wouldn't be where she is now.
Scrap the video, taking it off YouTube, so, all of that stuff. Yeah.
So I just tell people, just keep working at it and don't worry about those around you. Like, use it for inspiration if you need to, but don't start comparing yourself to others, or comparing yourself to, this age of 25 and 30 that makes everyone feel like they're a failure if they haven't accomplished certain things by those ages.
Yeah. I think that the only comparison you should make is comparing yourself to who you were a year ago or 5 years ago, right? To know that your growth is taking place and that you are evolving instead of comparing yourself to somebody else. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree.
Justina, thank you so much for sharing today. Are there any final thoughts that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I just want to, just live for yourself. I can't stress that enough. Just make sure that you're living for yourself and not for anybody else. And while you're doing that, make sure you take time to have fun, experience what the world has to offer. and just spread positivity.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. And for the listeners out there, you can check back in the show notes and you can find out where to connect with Justina to learn more about her and what she's up to. Again, Justina, thank you so much for your time and for taking the time out to chat with me today. And to my listeners, I will see you soon. Take care and have an awesome day.